Yeah, what's your success formula, Daniel? Like, how do you keep focus on developing your core, and have you ever experienced feature creep?
Yeah, well, I think feature creep is a thing that's a constant pressure on all projects. So that's something, it is because every time somebody says, "Oh, I want to build a button," that button will then eventually have, "Well, let's do a right click on that button and it'll do something else." There's always somebody with an idea of how something could be different or better or improved or something like that, which is all fine. I mean, that's part of product iterations. But the thing is that you have to recognize that good enough is good enough, and defining what's good enough needs to be written and agreed to in a non-emotional state, if you would, so you can embark upon doing a project where you have kind of known requirements that this is good enough to achieve the objectives that we want. Because it's so tempting to just do incremental small improvements along the way that seem obvious at the time, but you didn't forecast when you got started. And the thing is that can distract you from really what you need to be doing, because what's good enough is still good enough, and to your users, to many users, they won't understand these additional potential improvements until they've spent time with your product. And in order for them to spend time with your product, you need to just get it done. And so good enough gets the product in the hands of your users. Then you can start to improve it to address kind of concerns and feedback and updates that they want to do. And that's something I think a lot of companies tend to miss, that when you try to introduce something, you want to try to make it this grand, perfect, awesome thing. But in reality, almost every time you produce a version 1 of anything and you look back on it from 3 versions later, you realize how embarrassing it is. And if you don't feel embarrassed by your version 1, you've done something wrong. So feature creep is about just doing what's good enough, and then having the discipline to commit to just doing what's good enough. And that's how you really don't lose sight of what you need to produce. And so it requires kind of a team commitment to say this is good enough, and everybody to sign off on it, and not second guess decisions, so to speak, when they go on, unless there's a real compelling need that says, you know what, that button needs to say it's a button on it for people to understand anything that they need to do with it. And that could be construed as a bug, design bug or something like that, but still it comes back to just know what's good enough, try to stay true to that, and then move forward in building what's good enough to get your first version out the door.
Yeah, I think you put it well here. And then I guess you also train your team in some way to identify product scope changes early on. So it sounds like you're all well aware of how to stay focused.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to a comment about medical device regulations and classifications.
Uh-huh.
To get a CE mark, part of that QMS is how to build it. You have to build in change management. So theoretically, if you start your product or you embark on a digital health platform, you should also embark on a QMS system at the start. Do it, even if you're not going to go regulated, it's good practice, but you can borrow from the internet, you can download templates, but change management's important. And that's when you identify, is this change critical to the function of the product? Is this change just simply to enhance the operation or performance, reduce latency, or is this change just basically an operational thing to make it easier to manage? If you start to think about change management as like, how do you develop a philosophy of questioning it, scoring it, and then deciding, is this change really that important that you want to disrupt the sprint planning and the timelines? Then you could kind of have some process to evaluate internally when you come up with ideas, rather than being so rigid about saying, it's not in our original list, so we're not going to do it.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So you have to keep in mind all those documentational things early on.